Aryna Sabalenka broke down in tears, and Elena Rybakina had just exposed everything. Not just on the scoreboard, not just in the stats, but in the way the world's number one fell apart, emotionally, mentally, publicly, when someone finally had the audacity to hold up a mirror. This wasn't just a tennis match. This was a reckoning. A year filled with cheating accusations, sore loser moments, trash talk caught on camera, and a rival who refused to stay quiet. And by the time it all ended in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia in November 2025, only one woman was standing tall, trophy in hand. The other was sitting courtside, wiping tears from her face, trying to find the words. Stay with me, because this story goes so much deeper than a scoreline. To understand why this moment hit so hard, you have to understand what Aryna Sabalenka had built. By 2025, Sabalenka wasn't just the world number one, she was women's tennis. She had won back-to-back U.S. Open titles, she had captured the Australian Open in both 2023 and 2024, she had dominated the WTA season with a ferocity that no player in a generation had matched so consistently. 4 titles in 2025 alone: Brisbane, Miami, Madrid, and the U.S. Open. A 63-12 match record, a record-breaking $15 million in prize money in a single season, surpassing even Serena Williams' legendary 2013 campaign. She was, on paper, untouchable. And she knew it. The game knew it. Sponsors knew it. The media knew it. When Sabalenka walked into a venue, the conversation shifted. When she won, people moved on to the next tournament. When she lost, which was rare, the tennis world held its breath waiting to see how she'd react. Because that was always the question with Sabalenka. The tennis was never in doubt. It was the everything else. The screaming at herself on court, the racket smashing, the cold handshakes, the moments when losing seemed to break something inside her that the wins couldn't fully repair. And yet, the world kept forgiving it because she kept winning, because she was brilliant, because her power game, that thunderous serve, those groundbreaking ground strokes, was simply jaw-dropping to watch. She was box office. She was essential. She was the face of the sport. But empires have cracks, and in 2025, those cracks weren't just visible, they were widening. Because while Sabalenka was stacking titles and earnings and rankings points, she was also stacking controversies, moments that, taken individually, could be brushed off. But together they painted a portrait of a champion who was winning at all costs, whether that cost was sportsmanship, reputation, or the respect of her peers. And there was one woman on tour who wasn't willing to look away. One player who, through her silence and her brilliance, was building a case against everything Sabalenka stood for. Her name was Elena Rybakina, and she had been watching, waiting, preparing. The collision that was coming would shake women's tennis to its core. Still here? Good, because this is where it gets uncomfortable. Long before Riyadh, before the tearful trophy ceremony, before the trash talk caught on cameras in front of millions, there was Madrid. April 30th, 2025, the Madrid Open quarterfinals, Aryna Sabalenka versus Marta Kostyuk. A match that by any technical measure, Sabalenka won. But the way she won it, that was what the internet couldn't let go of. The score was tied in the second set tiebreak. Kostyuk was on the verge of taking control. The Ukrainian, who already had her own complicated history with Sabalenka, was on the edge of her seat. And then, the rain. Or, more specifically, Sabalenka's very selective relationship with the rain. Here's what happened. Sabalenka had already lost her first serve. She was down a point. The conditions weren't ideal. A light drizzle had begun falling on the Madrid clay. The umpire was heard clearly saying, "I don't think it's that bad yet to stop. We can still play a bit." Sabalenka was told to continue. She didn't. Instead, she walked back to the baseline, bounced the ball, looked up at the sky, and then refused to play. Not once, but twice. She kept stopping, kept citing the rain, kept pushing until the umpire, overwhelmed and outmaneuvered, finally halted play. What that meant by the rules of tennis was that Sabalenka would get to reserve her first serve when play resumed. The pressure point, the moment Kostyuk was most alive in the match, was reset, just like that. Kostyuk was furious. She stepped up to the chair umpire and made her feelings crystal clear. Her team was heard on camera saying words that said everything about the mood courtside. In a moment that went viral within hours, Kostyuk was caught telling her team, "She is never winning a Sportsman's Award, that's for sure." And tennis fans across the world agreed. Social media erupted. Aryna Sabalenka cheated shamelessly. A spoiled brat's tantrum, wrote a fan. Another posted, refusing to play, disobeying the chair. Funny the drizzle only got in the way after she lost her first serve. Even veteran journalist Christopher Clary weighed in, calling it a very weak decision that should never have been allowed to happen the way it did. Sabalenka won the match 7-7, 7-6, and after it was over, she stood at the microphone and said, "That was a battle. Conditions were incredibly tough. It wasn't about tennis. It was about how you handle your emotions. I'm super proud I was able to handle myself in such a difficult situation." Handle herself. The same woman who had just stopped play twice to reset a pressure point. The same woman who had smashed a racket and given a lukewarm handshake after losing the Australian Open final months earlier. The same woman whose negative sentiment on social media had reportedly been measured at 15% of all player-related tweets, the highest on the entire WTA tour. Handle herself. The world was watching, and it was starting to form an opinion. But here's the real question. Was this a pattern, or was the internet just piling on the biggest name in tennis? Keep watching, because what comes next will change how you see this whole story. While Sabalenka was making headlines for all the wrong reasons, Elena Rybakina was living through her own storm. But hers was different, quieter, more dangerous. The controversy surrounding Rybakina in 2025 wasn't about what she did on the court. It was about what was allegedly being done to her off it. Her coach, Stefano Vukov, had been provisionally suspended by the WTA at the start of 2025, right before the Australian Open, for breaching the WTA's code of conduct. The investigation that followed was damning. According to WTA sources, Vukov had reportedly used deeply degrading language toward Rybakina. He allegedly called her stupid. He reportedly told her she would still be picking potatoes in Russia if not for him. The WTA found that his conduct had caused her frequent illness due to stress and psychological pressure. It was the kind of allegation that should have ended a coaching career immediately, the kind of story that should have made every headline, every sports desk, every prime-time broadcast. And yet, here's what made it even more complex. Rybakina defended him, publicly, loudly. "He never mistreated me," she said. "I have never filed any complaint against him." She called the WTA's decision unfair. She fought to have him reinstated. And when the WTA eventually lifted his suspension in August 2025, Vukov returned to her team at the Cincinnati Open. The WTA, the media, and even some fellow players had opinions about all of this. Sabalenka, when asked, gave a diplomatic non-answer. "Honestly, I'm close to Elena, but not that much to comment. I know they were working pretty well." Technically neutral, but the internet noticed she'd said it at all. Then came the WTA Finals in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, November 2025, the crown jewel of the women's season. And Rybakina, the same player who had spent most of 2025 navigating a coaching scandal, managing public criticism, and battling back from a difficult stretch of form, showed up and simply dismantled everyone in her path. She beat Iga Świątek, she beat Jessica Pegula, she went through the entire tournament undefeated, and then in the final, she walked onto the court against the most dominant player on the planet. And she destroyed her. 6-3, 7-6, a 7-0 tiebreak that wasn't even close. 13 aces in a single match. Rybakina extended her winning streak to 11 consecutive matches. And with every passing game in that final, you could see it. The composure, the silence, the utter absence of drama or noise that defined Rybakina as a player, slowly suffocating Sabalenka's fire. The world number one, for the first time in a long time, had no answer. This is the moment the internet will never forget. When Rybakina hit the final point of that tiebreak, when the last ball fell and the tournament was over, the cameras followed both players. Rybakina smiled, quiet, contained, dignified, the way she always is, the way that makes her so difficult to rattle and so easy to underestimate. And then the cameras found Sabalenka. She was sitting with her team, courtside, and she broke down completely. The tears came fast. The emotion was raw and real and visible to everyone watching in the arena and the millions watching at home. This was a woman who had worked harder than almost any player alive in 2025, who had won more titles than anyone else on tour, who had broken Serena Williams' single-season earnings record. And she was crying because she had lost. Again, because this was her 5th final loss of the season. 5 finals. And this one, the last one, the biggest one, the year-ending one, went to Rybakina. But here is where it gets truly controversial, because it wasn't just the tears that people talked about. It was what Sabalenka said. Caught on camera during the trophy ceremony, before she had fully composed herself, Sabalenka used a Russian expression, a proverb that translates roughly as, "Once a year, even a stick shoots." The meaning is unmistakable. It suggests that Rybakina's victory was luck, that anyone can win once in a while, that this wasn't a demonstration of superior talent, just fortunate timing. She said this about a player who had just beaten her 6-3, 7-0 in a tiebreak, about a player who was riding an 11-match winning streak, about a player who had just served 13 aces against the best returner in the world. The backlash was immediate and severe. One fan wrote, "Saba said the same thing about Keys in their US Open 2023 match, always disrespecting her WTA colleagues." Another posted, "Dude, when will she stop acting like this? You're world number one, and you win a lot every year. Be respectful the one time people beat you." A third, more bluntly, "She's a champion, but also one of the worst losers in the sport currently." Even Rybakina was eventually asked about the comments. In an interview with Tengri News weeks later, she addressed Sabalenka's remarks with the same quiet grace that defines her. She said she holds good feelings for Sabalenka and her team, and that she did not take the remarks to heart. Class. Pure, unshakable class. But make no mistake, the contrast was not lost on anyone. 2 champions, 1 trophy, and a gap in sportsmanship that no ranking could close. But wait, was Rybakina's back-to-back finals run a redemption story, or is this the beginning of a new era where the queen finally loses her crown? And was Sabalenka's behavior in 2025 just passion, or is it costing her something she can never buy back? Let's be clear about something. Rybakina's victory wasn't just a tennis result, it was a statement. Here was a player who had spent the better part of 2025 being talked about for all the wrong reasons. Her coach suspended, her personal life leaked, the WTA releasing details about her situation publicly, details that, in the eyes of many fans, crossed a serious line. One fan posted to the WTA's official channels, "Tried to ensure stronger safeguards in your sport by leaking Elena Rybakina's personal life details? You're sick, disgusting." And through it all, Rybakina said almost nothing. She didn't hold press conferences to attack the system. She didn't go on social media to rally supporters. She just played tennis. And when she won the WTA Finals, beating Sabalenka, the undisputed queen of the tour, in the final, she let the trophy speak. But here's what made it genuinely extraordinary. Before the match, most of the tennis world expected Sabalenka to win. She had dominated the end-of-season group stage without losing a single set. She had beaten multiple top 10 players on her way to the final. She was rested, she was focused, and she was defending the status she had built all year.
Rybakina was the 6th seed. She had come in with moderate expectations, but she had 11 consecutive wins behind her, a serve that nobody in women's tennis could match, and something else, a score to settle. Not a petty one, not a personal vendetta, but the quiet, burning desire of someone who had been doubted, diminished, and dragged into a public controversy for 12 months. And when they played, when those 13 aces landed in Sabalenka's court, when that 7-0 tiebreak played out in front of the world, what Rybakina exposed wasn't just Sabalenka's technical vulnerabilities, it exposed the fragility underneath the dominance. The fact that when Sabalenka was truly challenged, not just tennis-wise, but mentally, emotionally, in the kind of match that demands you stay ice-cold under pressure, she cracked. Tim Henman, watching from the commentary box, spotted something specific. Sabalenka was not doing the small things right. Her return game, usually one of her weapons, was malfunctioning. Her emotional regulation, already a known weakness, was failing her at the critical moments. And Rybakina, who plays with the emotional temperature of a deep-sea diver, never gave her a way back in. The Madrid cheating accusations, the cold handshakes, the racket smashing, the Russian proverb about sticks shooting, all of it, viewed through the lens of that final, told a coherent story that Sabalenka had built her dynasty on power and aggression, but had never fully built the emotional infrastructure to handle losing with grace. And Rybakina, silent, steady, surgically brilliant, had just shown the whole world exactly where the gaps were. By the time the 2026 Australian Open came around, something had shifted in women's tennis. Rybakina, now reunited with Vukov and firing on all cylinders, walked into Melbourne and did it again. She defeated Sabalenka in the final, claiming her 2nd Grand Slam title, her first since Wimbledon 2022, in a 3-set thriller that saw Sabalenka fight back from a set down before Rybakina won 5 consecutive games to take the decisive set, 6-4. This time, Sabalenka was more composed in defeat. She congratulated Rybakina graciously. She praised her rival's tennis. The Russian proverb was absent, but the result was the same. Rybakina, trophy in hand, smiled and said what she'd been holding on to for a long time. We had a lot of things going on. I'm really glad we achieved this result. The lot of things, everyone knew what she meant. The banned coach, the leaked personal details, the months of doubt and scrutiny and noise. All of it had led to this, the ultimate answer. And what about Sabalenka? In her end-of-season Instagram post after the WTA Finals loss, she had written, "This was a tough year, but incredibly rewarding. A Grand Slam title, world #1 for the 2nd consecutive year, and a few trophies later, I couldn't have done it without Team Tiger. I've learned so many lessons through the ups and the downs." Her boyfriend commented simply, "One more, Mayomore." In that, there is something genuinely human, something that makes it impossible to simply dismiss Sabalenka as a villain. She is brilliant, she's driven, she's deeply competitive in a way that sometimes swallows its own grace. But she is also someone who clearly feels everything, the wins, the losses, the expectations, with an intensity that very few athletes can sustain. The tears